So welcome back. Hopefully you guys have been working hard on modeling atoms and molecules and proteins and understanding how the chemical properties of these atoms and molecules relate to how things interact with each other, how proteins fold, and those types of concepts. So what we're going to do now is talk about some other molecules. We're going to talk about oxygen, carbon dioxide, and again, water. Now, as you probably have learned over the years, our bodies use something called cellular respiration in order to take oxygen and convert oxygen and glucose into energy that the cells need to function, ATP. So what we're going to be working on and talking about in this whole program is how oxygen is transported to the cells in order to allow it to be converted into energy. Now, carbon dioxide and oxygen are nonpolar molecules. We talked about how polar molecules can interact with water. Well, because these are overall no net charge in oxygen and carbon dioxide, they are nonpolar and don't interact well with water. So they are slightly soluble in water, but for the most part, not very. Carbon dioxide is a little bit more soluble than oxygen. It's actually about 20 times more soluble than oxygen. And even though it's nonpolar, it's because it has a separation of charge. So the carbon atom is slightly positive, and the oxygen atoms on the end are slightly negative, and so there is some separation of charge across the molecule that allows it to interact with water to some extent. So what happens is water will combine with carbon dioxide to form something called carbonic acid, H2CO3. And this then can dissociate into a bicarbonate atom, HCO3 minus, and a hydrogen ion, H plus. Okay? And this can happen in water. So rainwater, as it goes through the atmosphere, will dissolve CO2, and that will be converted into bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ion. And that's why rainwater is slightly more acidic, because it has hydrogen ions. It accumulates hydrogen ions by this process. Now, in the body, in the cells, there's an enzyme that actually accelerates this process. It's an enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. And it's one of the fastest, it catalyzes one of the fastest reactions in the body, the conversion of CO2 into bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ion. So in cellular respiration, oxygen and glucose combine to form ATP, energy, and a waste product, carbon dioxide. Now, this carbon dioxide needs to be removed from the cells and from the body. And this happens by having the CO2 be removed through our venous blood. So when the carbon dioxide gets into cells, it is rapidly converted to bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ion so that it can be soluble. Now, in the areas where the cells are making a lot of energy and carbon dioxide, and they are then allowing the carbon dioxide to flow back into the blood, this is where carbon dioxide is very high, and so this reaction is going to proceed in this direction, from carbon dioxide to bicarbonate and hydrogen ion. And that's going to increase the pH, because it will be increasing the hydrogen ion concentration in the venous blood. So we know that venous blood tends to be slightly acidic. Now, as this blood travels to the lungs, where it has to get rid of this carbon dioxide, now in this area, if we're breathing, the lungs are going to have a very low concentration of carbon dioxide. And because it's so low, that's going to drive this reaction in the reverse direction, right? So there's going to be a lot of this bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ions, and that's going to allow it to move towards the other direction and produce carbon dioxide and water, so that the carbon dioxide can travel out of the red blood cell through the alveolus of the lungs and be breathed out through the lungs into the atmosphere. Now, one other thing is, if you try to hold your breath, the concentration of carbon dioxide will increase in your lungs, and that will make it so that it won't be able to convert to carbon dioxide. It won't be able to get rid of it because there won't be that concentration gradient. And in these cases, we have chemoreceptors in our body that sense this high hydrogen ion concentration and force us to breathe. So this is a protective mechanism to make sure that we continue to breathe. Now let's go back to oxygen. Now, we know how carbon dioxide is going to be getting around and getting out of the body, because we need to keep getting rid of it so that we don't have these problems with increased waste products. But oxygen is really important. We got to get the oxygen to the cells. So that's critical. And if it's not soluble or very soluble in the blood, how is that going to happen? Well, through evolution, as animals have gotten more and more complex, two really important evolutionary advantages have evolved for complex animals to be able to get oxygen to all these different cells. And one of them is the circulatory system. So it developed this pump, the heart, and these blood vessels that allow the blood to get to all these different cells. But then the other thing that has evolved over time is an oxygen carrier molecule. Because without something to carry oxygen to the cells, we would never have enough capacity of oxygen in the blood to be able to get where it needs to go, to get enough oxygen to where it needs to go. And that's where myoglobin and hemoglobin come in. And so in the next unit, we're going to talk about how hemoglobin is able to bind oxygen and get it to the cells.